Chapter 10. Saturday, August 27th, 1977, 12:10 a.m. The wind raised a steady haunting whoo in the highest reach of the trees. Thunder rumbled frequently, each peal louder and more unsettling than the one that had come before it. Above the forest, the sky periodically blazed with lightning. The electric glow pushed down through the canopy of interlaced branches and left in its wake a series of stroboscopic images that dazzled the eye. In the dense underbrush, small animals scrambled this way and that, busily searching for food or water or companionship or safety. Or perhaps, Paul thought, as one of them dashed across the path and startled him, they were frightened of the oncoming storm. Paul and Sam had expected to find armed guards rather than animals at the edge of the woods that surrounded the mill, but there were none. Although all of the lights were in the main building, the structure seemed, as did the land around it, deserted. They circled through the woods. Eventually they came to the employee parking lot and studied the scene from behind a thick clump of laurel. The helicopter was there on the macadam, 30 feet away. A man stood beside in the darkness, smoking a cigarette, watching the lightning and the fast-moving clouds. Paul whispered, "Dawson or Klinger?" "I don't think so," Sam said. "Neither do I." "Then he's the pilot. You see a gun?" "No, nothing. Move in now." "Wait. For what?" "The right to moment." They watched. A few seconds later, the pilot dropped his cigarette and crushed it under the sole of his shoe. He put his hands in his pocket and began to walk aimlessly about, just killing time. At first he came towards the trees, wandered within 12 or 10 feet of them, then turned and went back the way he'd come. "Quickly," Sam said. Paul stood up. He eased through the laurel and ran after the pilot. The man heard and turned. His face was a black mask, but his eyes seemed phosphorescent. "Who?" "I am the key," Paul said. "I'm the lock." "Speak softly." "Yes, sir." Paul looked beyond the helicopter. He could see the windows, most of them with a light beyond them, on the second and third floor of the main building at the end of the storage yard. If he could see the windows, anyone who happened to glance out might be able to see him in turn despite the darkness. He hustled the pilot closer to the helicopter, where they were pretty much hidden from the main building. Sam joined them and said, "What's your name?" "Malcolm Spencer." "You are the pilot?" "Yes, I am." "Where's Leonard Dawson?" "In the mill," Spencer said. "Which building?" "The biggest one." "Which floor? First, second, or third?" "First floor. There's a sort of public sales area with..." "And Ernest Klinger," Sam said. "Where's he?" "He's in Black River," Spencer said. "That can't be right, sir." "You mean he's in town?" Paul asked. "That's right." Paul and Sam glanced at each other. "Something's wrong?" the pilot asked. He seemed to be concerned about them. "You're lying," Paul said. Surprised, Spencer said. "No, sir. I'm the key," Paul said. "I'm the lock," Spencer said. "Where's Klinger?" "He's in Black River." Paul stared at him. "Christ." To the pilot, Sam said, "You took Klinger and Dawson to the logging camp, didn't you? And then brought them to the mill?" "No, just Mr. Dawson. General Klinger went to town from the camp." "When?" "A couple of minutes after we got here," Spencer said. He smiled uncertainly. His teeth seemed more radiant than his eyes. "How did he go? Not in the chopper?" "No, sir. He took a car." "Why?" Before he could get out more than one word of the question, Sam screamed and stumbled forward against the helicopter. In the same instant, the night silence was split open by a single rifle shot. Instinctively, Paul dropped to the ground and rolled. A bullet cracked into the pavement where he'd just seen, ricocheted into the darkness. A second bullet smashed the macadam on the other side of him, bracketing him. He rolled onto his back and sat up. He saw the rifleman at once, down on one knee in a sportsman pose, 30 feet away at the edge of the woods. On the drive from town, Paul had reloaded the combat magnum. Now he held it in both hands and squeezed off 5 quick shots. All of them missed the mark. However, the sharp barking of the revolver and the deadly whine of all those bullets skipped across the pavement apparently unnerved the man with the rifle. Instead of trying to finish what he had begun, he stood and ran. Paul scrambled to his feet, took a few steps after him, and fired once more. Untouched, the rifleman headed away in a big loop that would take him back to the mill complex. "Sam?" "Yeah." He could barely see Sam, dark clothes against the macadam, and was thankful for the older man's telltale white hair and beard. "You were hit in the leg." Paul stared towards him. "How bad?" "Flesh wound," Sam said. "That was Dawson. Get after him, for God's sake." "But if you're hurt..." "I'll be fine. Malcolm can make a tourniquet. Now get after him, damn it." Paul ran. At the end of the parking area, he passed the rifle. It was on the ground. Dawson had either dropped it by accident and had been too frightened to stop and retrieve it, or he had discarded it in the panic. Still running, Paul fished in his pocket with one hand for the extra bullet he was carrying. 12:15 a.m. The wooden tower stairs creaked under Klinger's weight. He paused and counted slowly to 30 before going up 3 more steps and pausing again. If he climbed too fast, the woman and the girl would know that he was coming, and if they were ready and waiting for him, well, he would be committing suicide. When he walked into the belfry platform, he hoped that by waiting for 30 seconds or more, as such as a minute between brief advances, he could make them think that the creaking stairs were only settling noises or product of the wind. He went up 3 more steps. 12:16 a.m. Ahead, Dawson disappeared around a corner of the mill. When he reached the same corner a moment later, Paul stopped and studied the northward yard. Huge stacks of logs that had been piled up to feed the mill during the long winter, several pieces of heavy equipment, a couple of lumber trucks, a conveyor belt running on an incline ramp from the mill to the maw of a big furnace where sawdust and scrap wood were incinerated. There were simply too many places out there in which Dawson could hide and wait for him. He turned away from the north yard and went to the door in the west wall of the building, back the way he had come, 30 feet from the corner. It wasn't locked. He stepped into a short, well-lit corridor. The enormous processing room lay at the end of it, the bull chain leading from the mill pond up feeding chutes into the building, then a cross-cut saw, a log deck, the carriage that moved logs into the wading blades that would make lumber of them, the giant bandsaw, edging machine, trimmer saws, dip tank, grading ramp, the green chain, and then the storage racks. He remembered all of these terms from a tour from the manager had given Ryan and Mark 2 summers ago. In the processing room, the fluorescent strip lights were burning, but none of the machines were working. There were no men tending them. To his right was a washroom, to his left a set of stairs. Taking the steps 2 at a time for 4 flights, the first level was 2 floors high in order to accommodate the machines in it. He came out in the second floor hallway. He stopped to think, then went to the 5th office on the left. The door was locked. He kicked it twice. The lock held. There was a glass case bolted to the corridor. It contained a fire extinguisher and an axe. He jammed the revolver in his belt, opened the front of the case, and took out the axe. He used the flat head of it to batter the knob from the front office door. When the knob fell off, the cheap latch snapped. He dropped the axe, pushed open the ruined door, and went inside. The office was dark. He didn't switch on any lights because he didn't want to reveal his position. He closed the door to the hall so that he would not be silhouetted by the power light that spilled in. The window in the north wall office opened above the first floor terrace. He slid one of them up, slipped through it, and stepped into the tar paper terrace roof. The wind buffeted him. He took the combat magnum from his belt. If Dawson was hiding anywhere in the north yard, this was the best vantage point from which to spot him. The darkness offers Dawson good protection, for none of the lights was in the yard. He could have turned them on, of course, but he didn't know where to find the switches, and he didn't want to waste a lot of time looking for them. The only thing that moved out there was the clattering conveyor belt that rolled continuously up the incline ramp to the scrap furnace. It should have been shut down with the rest of the equipment, but it had been overlooked. The belt came out of the building directly beneath him and sloped to a high point 20 feet above the ground. It met the furnace door 40 yards away. Because the cone-shaped furnace, 30 feet in diameter at the base, 10 feet in diameter at the top, 40 feet high, was primed by gas flame. The fire in it was never out unless the mill foreman ordered it extinguished. Even now, when the belt had no fuel for it, the furnace roared, judging by the intensity of the flame leaping beyond the open door. However, several hundred pounds of the day's import conveyors out of the mill before Dawson had halted operation had yet to be fully consumed. Otherwise, the yard was quiet. Still, the mill pond, with a giant grappling hook suspended from thick wires over the centre of it, lay to the right of the ramp and the furnace. It was dotted with logs that looked a bit like dozing alligators. A narrow channel of water cord led from the pond to the terrace. When the mill was in operation, slipmen poled logs along the loft slip to the chutes that were covered by the terrace roof. Once in the chutes, the logs were snared by hooked bull chains and dragged into the processing system. East and north of the pond was a deck. These 40-foot high walls of gargantuan logs set aside to supply the mill with work during the winter. To the left of the ramp and the furnace, 2 lumber trucks, a high lift, and a few other pieces of heavy equipment were parked in a row, backed up against the chain link fence of a storage yard. Dawson wasn't to be seen in any of them. Thunder and lightning brought a sudden fall of fat raindrops. Some sixth sense told Paul that he had heard more than the clap of thunder. Propelled by an icy premonition, he spun around. Dawson had come out of the window behind him. He was no more than a yard away. He was older than Paul, a decade and a half older, but he was also taller and heavier, and he looked deadly in the rain-lashed night. He had an axe, the goddamn fire axe, in both hands, raised over his head. He swung it. Klinger was at the midpoint of the tower when the rain began to fall again. It drummed noisily on the belfry shingles and on the roof of the church, providing excellent cover for his ascent. He waited until he was absolutely certain that the downpour would last, that he went upward without pausing after every third step. He couldn't even hear the creaking himself, exhilarated, brimming with confidence now, the Webley clutched in his right hand. He climbed through the glass half of the tower in less than a minute and rushed into the belfry platform. Paul crouched, the axe blade whistled over his head. Startled to hear himself screaming, unable to stop screaming, abruptly aware that the Smith & Wesson was still in his hand, Paul pulled the trigger. The bullet tore through Dawson's right shoulder. The axe flew from his hands. It arched into the darkness and smashed through the windshield of one of the lumber trucks. When, with a certain eerie grace, Dawson pirouetted just once and toppled onto Paul. The combat magnet tumbled in the path of the axe. Grappling with each other, clinging to each other, they fell off the terrace roof. The belfry held little light in the midst of the primeval storm, but it was bright enough for Klinger to see that the only person there was the Annandale girl. Impossible. She was sitting on the platform, her back to the half wall, and she seemed to be regarding him with dread. What the hell? There should have been 2 of them. The 9-foot square belfry wasn't large enough for a game of hide and seek. What he saw must be true, but there should have been 2 of them. The night was rocked with thunder, and razor-tinted forks of white lightning stabbed the earth. Wind boomed through the open tower. He stood over the child, looking up at him, her voice wavering. She said, "Please, please, don't shoot me." "Where is the other one?" Klinger said. "Where did she go?" The voice behind him said, "Hey, mister." They heard him coming up the stairs. They were ready and waiting for him. But how had they done it? Sick, trembling, aware that it was too late for him to save himself, he nevertheless turned to meet the danger. There was no one behind him. The storm conveniently provided another short burst of incandescent light, confirming that he saw what he thought he saw. He and the child were alone on the platform. "Hey, mister." He looked up. A black form like a monstrous bat was suspended above him. The woman, Jenny Edison. He could not see her face, but he had no doubt about who she was. She had heard him coming up the stairs when he thought he was being so clever. She had climbed up top the bell and had braced herself in the steel bell supports against the ceiling at the highest point of the arch, 6 feet overhead, like a goddamn bat. "It's 27 years since I was in Korea," he thought. "I'm too old for commando raids, too old." He couldn't see the gun she held, but he knew he was looking into the barrel of it. Behind him, the Annandale girl scrambled out of the line of fire. "It happened so fast, too fast. Good riddance, you bastard," the Edison woman said. He never heard the shot. Dawson landed on his back in the middle of the incline ramp, trapped in the other man's clumsy but effective embrace. Paul fell on top of him, driving the breath from both of them. After a long shudder, the conveyor belt adjusted to their weight. It swiftly carried them head first towards the open mouth of the great furnace. Grasping limp, Paul managed to raise his head from Dawson's heavy chest. He saw a circle of yellow and orange red flames flickering satanically 30 yards ahead, 25 yards, winded with a bullet wound in one shoulder. Having cracked his head against the ramp when he fell, Dawson was not immediately in a fighting mode. He sucked air, choked on the fiercely heavy rain, and blew water from his nostril. The belt clattered and thumped upwards. 20 yards. Paul tried to roll off the highway of death with his good hand. Dawson held Paul by the shirt. 15 yards. Let go, you bastard. Paul twisted, squirmed, hadn't the strength to free himself. Dawson's finger was like claws. 10 yards. Tapping his last reserves of energy, the dregs from the barrel, Paul pulled his fist and punched Dawson in the face. Dawson let go of him. 5 yards. Whimpering, already feeling the furnace seat, he threw himself to the right off the ramp. How far? To the ground. He fell with surprising little pain into a bed of weeds and mud besides the mill pond. When he looked up, he saw Dawson, delirious, unaware of the danger until it was too late for him, dropping headfirst into that crackling, spitting, and rolling, hellish pit of fire. If the man screamed, his voice was blotted out by a cymbal-like crash of thunder. The ending. Saturday. August 27th, 1977, 5 a.m. The mess hall at the logging camp was a rectangle 80 feet by 40 feet. Sam and Raya sat behind a dining table at one end of the long room. A single file line of weary lumbermen stretched from their table across the hall and out the door at the far end. As each man stepped up to the table, Sam used the power of the key-lock program to restructure his memory. When the new recollections were firmly implanted, he excused the man, and Raya struck a name from the Union Supply Company employee list. Between the 13th and the 31st subject, Raya said to Sam, "How do you feel? How do you feel? I'm not the one who was shot. You've been hurt too," he said. "All I feel is grown up, more than that, and sad," she said. "And sad? Because it'll never be the same, not ever." Her lips trembled. She cleared her throat. "Now, how's your leg?" "About a yard long," he said. He pulled at her chin. She pulled on his beard. He managed to get a smile from her, and that was better medicine than Doc Chapman's antibiotics. 6:30 a.m. The storm clouds had begun to break up 2 hours ago. Dawn brought welcome shafts of autumn sunlight. In the dense pine forest, half a mile above Black River, 3 men lowered the remains of Dawson and the bodies of Salisbury and clinging into a common grave. "All right," Jenny told them. "Fill it up." With each shovel of dirt that struck the corpse, she felt more alive. 9:30 a.m. After a refueling stop in Augustus, the Hornet-like helicopter put down on the landing pad between the Greenwich home at 9:30 in the morning. Get it gassed up and service or trip back to Black River this evening," Paul said. "Yes, sir," Malcolm Spencer said. "Then go home and get some sleep. Be back here by 7 o'clock this evening. This should give us both time to rest." "I can use it," Spencer said. Paul got out of the helicopter and stretched. He had showered and shaved and changed clothes before leaving Maine, but that had refreshed him only temporarily. He was stiff, sore, and tied deep in the bones. He went to the rear door of the stone house and knocked. A servant answered. She was a plump, pleasant-faced woman in her 50s. Her hair was tied back in a bun. Her hands were white with flour. "Yes, sir. I'm the key. I'm the lock. Let me in." She stepped out of his way. Inside said, "Where's the computer?" "The what, sir?" she said. "The computer, Dawson computer." "I haven't any idea, sir." He nodded. "Okay, forget about that. Go back to whatever you're doing." He looked around the level kitchen. "Doing a bit of baking, I see. Go ahead with that. Forget that I was ever here." Coming to herself, she returned to the counter beside the oven. He poked about on his own until he located the computer room. When he found it, he sat before one of the programming consoles and typed out the access codes that he had gotten from Salisbury. The computer responded on all of its readout screen. Proceed. Picking at the typewriter keys with one finger, doing precisely what Salisbury told him to do. He ordered it to erase all stored data. 5 seconds later, the readout screen printed all stored data erased. The message disappeared from the tubes, and his second order was displayed for a few seconds. "Erase all programs," he said. "Request confirmation of last directives." So weary that the letters on the keys blurred before him, Wall typed again. "Erase all programs." Those 3 words shimmered on the screen background for perhaps half a minute. Then they blinked several times, vanished. He typed the words Black River and asked for a readout and a full printer of associate data. The computer did nothing. Next he typed the words key lock and asked for a readout and a full printout of all information on the file. Nothing. He requested the computer run the system check on itself and display its circuitry on the cathode ray tubes. The tubes showed nothing. He leaned back in the programmer's chair and closed his eyes. Years ago, when he had been in high school, he had seen a boy lose a finger in a woodworking shop. The boy had sliced it off in the bandsaw, and a very even cut between the second and third knuckles. For 2 or 3 minutes, while everybody around him babbled in panic, the boy had treated the blood stump as little more than a curiosity. He even joked about it, and then, when his composure had infected those who were giving him first aid, he suddenly came to terms with what had happened. Suddenly recognized the loss and the pain, began to scream and wail. In much the same fashion, the meaning of Mark's death exploded in Paul, hit him with the emotional equivalent of a truck ploughing through a stone wall. He doubled over in the chair, and for the first time since he'd come across the pathetic body in the freezer, he wept. 6 p.m. When he got out of the car, Sam stood for a while looking at the general store. Jenny said, "What's the matter, Dad?" "Just decide how much I can get for it." "For the store you're selling?" "I'm selling, but it's your life." "I'm getting out of Black River," he said. "I can't stay here, knowing that any time I want I can just open these people with the phrase, use them." "You wouldn't use them," she said, taking him by the arm as Ryan took his other arm. "But knowing that I could, that sort of thing can eat up the soul. Rod a man up inside. Flanked by them, he went up to the porch steps for the first time in his life. He felt like an old man. Saturday, October 1st, 1977. The following headlines appeared at the bottom of the front page of the New York Times. Mrs. Dawson hires investigators dissatisfied with FBI's work. Saturday, October 8th, 1977. Two bellhops showed them to the honeymoon suite. On the desk in the parlor there was an arrangement of carnation and roses, compliments of the management. Jenny made him savor the fragrance. First a rose by itself, then a carnation, then a rose and a carnation together. Later they made love, taking their time about it, doing what most pleased each other. He seemed to float on her and she on him, he in her and she in him. It was rich, full experience, and they were sated afterwards. For a while they were silent, laying on their backs, holding hands, eyes closed. At last she said, "It was different this time. Not bad though," he said. "At least not for me." "Oh no, not bad. Not for me either." "What then?" "Just different. I don't know. Maybe we've gained something. Intensity, I think. But we've also lost something. There wasn't any innocence to it this time. We're not innocent people anymore." "I guess we aren't," she said. "We're killers," he thought. "Children of the 1970s, sons and daughters of the great machine age. Survivalist." "All right," he told himself angrily. "Enough. We're killers. But even killers can grab hold of a little happiness. More important, even killers can give a little happiness. And isn't that the most anyone can do in this life? Give a little happiness?" He thought of Mark, the fake death certificate, the small grave next to Annie's casket. He turned to Jenny again, looked to her in her arms, took her in his arms, and let the world shrink in until it was no larger than their two bodies. The end. Thanks for listening.